Okay, so it's July 10th, 6 days ago, July 4th, the Guadalupe River in Texas flooded, as I'm sure we all know, and the results were catastrophic. The current estimates are more than 119 people died in the flood, but there are more than 100 people who are still missing. And one of the particular tragedies on that day was the flooding of Camp Mystic. So this girls' camp down by the river, apparently a very well-known Christian children's camp in Texas. 27 children and counselors perished in the flood. What I wanted to talk about today is not just that tragedy, but in particular, some images that have come out of the tragedy, like the image you see here. Because as I'm going to talk about, the images have received a very mixed reaction online. So we see, first of all, this image, and then in this image, you see the three girls running toward Jesus and being embraced by him. And then it's often been posted, I've seen with commentary. So on the right, you see one by one, they ran into his arms, soaked in river water, but bathed in glory. Little feet that once danced across the campgrounds now ran through the gates of heaven. Their shirts still read Camp Mystic across their hearts, but now they wear robes of light. Here's another. Here's another one. Now, one thing I want to note here is there are actually at least two images. So the image here is different than the previous one. The image of Jesus and the faces of the girls and that are all slightly different. But what's probably most obviously noticeable or different is in this image, the girl being held by Jesus has another piece of blue fabric hanging off of her foot, which is very odd. It almost is like there's another uniform for another camp counselee that was left behind and it's hanging off of her foot. And that's not in this image of the girl here. But let's set that aside, the fact that there are a couple variations, at least, of this image. Note in here the wording is this one culminates on Revelation 21:4. He will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no mourning, death, or crying. Note this. So for Christians, these have been reproduced, right, as a way of dealing with the tragedy and the grief of it. And what's interesting is that there have been a lot of people who have responded negatively to those same images. I've seen almost as many people tweeting scathing responses to these images as welcoming them. So this person, Logistrix, retweets the image that somebody else clearly found moving, and he says, or she says, "No, this is disgusting," which strikes me. It was striking to me. It's like, what is disgusting about the image? And that's what I just want to explore a little bit and reflect on the different ways that people respond to an image like this and why. I think, first of all, let's be clear what the image is. Well, first of all, let's be clear on one thing. So it was probably AI generated. I assume these images have been AI generated, and that's been a point of some criticism, and some people just are resistant to AI or think it's being overused. I don't disagree with that assessment, but let's set that aside. Um, is there something offensive about the image itself? Something that is actually disgusting? So first, again, the image is being shared by Christians, I think it's safe to assume, and it is functioning as what we can call a comfort image. In other words, it is meant to express comfort at the loss of loved ones. Now, it could be that some people have recoiled at it and called it disgusting because sometimes things that are intended as comfort gestures can come across as trite, and that can be offensive. Now, here's a terribly trite thing. So, for example, let's say a parent lost their child in a flood, and you say to them, "Well, there's now one more angel in heaven." I think that you could say, even though that may have been well-intentioned, pretty close to disgusting. I mean, it's pretty offensive to say there's one more angel in heaven, because it sounds trite and trivializing of the event and of the ensuing grief. I don't have that reaction to this image. I don't find this to be trite. Uh, it you may not like it in terms of the aesthetic of it, right? It might seem to be like a little too cloying or saccharine for some people, but it's a comfort image. It's meant to help people in experiencing pain and sadness and loss. And if it helps people, it seems to have accomplished its purpose. So I don't have personally the objection of that it seems to be trite or trivializing. Another objection is a deeper theological objection, which is, well, one of them could be like the very, it comes back to the problem of evil and the idea that God would allow evil, that he would allow children to be drowned, only to then embrace them a few hours later after they've been drowned in heaven. And there's something intrinsically offensive about that. There's a deeper idea here I've encountered, which I find interesting, that when terrible things happen, some people want to believe there is a reason why it happened, as terrible as it may be. And that the very idea that there is a reason why it happened is a comfort to them. Other people are offended by the very idea that there could be a reason why something happened, why God allowed something to happen. They would rather there be no reason why it happened. And I think to some degree, the varying response to this image, if whether you're disgusted and repelled by it, find it offensive, or whether you're maybe drawn to it or indifferent to it, could be related to some degree to whether you are compelled by wanting to find a reason for terrible things that happen or not wanting to find a reason. Another thing related to that is, I mean, I think just it highlights for some people, to go back to what I was maybe alluding to earlier, it highlights for some people that there is a sense that on the Christian view, God, I'll use the language, stood by and did nothing while children were drowned, only to embrace them later. In other words, it's not even the idea that there was a reason why it happened, but rather that God did nothing when it happened. And yet God steps in later to embrace the children. And some people may be offended at that and find that disgusting. And I guess to those people, I will just say, I understand your perspective, but please understand this, that these comfort images are made by Christians, I take it, and largely intended for Christians to offer comfort from within a Christian worldview. And if you find a Christian worldview disgusting, this may not be the time to have that conversation. This may be the time to express sympathy for others who are processing a terrible tragedy from within their theological and pastoral perspective.